What's up, everybody? Thanks as always for supporting the show. It would mean a lot to me if you would take a second to scroll down and hit that subscribe button to the Hoops Tonight YouTube channel, and then follow me on social media on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter so you guys don't miss any of our content over the course of this season. All right, let's talk some basketball. All right, before we get out of here, let's talk Clippers. Big win against Oklahoma City last night, as I expected. As I told you guys after the Minnesota Timberwolves win, my initial kind of interpretation of the Clippers is they're kind of matchup dependent, and they're going to struggle a lot with a lot of these bigger teams that can kind of bully them. And then they're going to, especially the ones that have good perimeter defenders that can make long perimeter defenders that can challenge Paul George and Kawhi pull-up jump shots. And then I thought they would kind of throttle the other perimeter teams, the other finesse teams, right? And they kind of handled OKC last night, albeit OKC on the tail end of a back-to-back. Paul George was absolutely magnificent down the stretch. He had a huge pull-up jump shot over Jalen Williams, a couple of nasty, tough, tight window, short opening catch-and-shoot jump shots, had a big reverse dunk in transition at the end of the game. It was crazy Paul George performance. But as I said before the Minnesota game, after these two games, I want to add the Clippers to my contender list. And I just wanted to see those two games before we got there. And those two games kind of legitimized most of my beliefs about this team at this point in the season. So let's talk Clippers big picture first. And let's start with the good. They have diversity of shot creation. That's a major thing for me. They have a finesse wing, a power wing, and a pick and roll maestro, right? Paul George is your, a dribble, pull-up shooter guy. Kawhi Leonard is your fight for short range, pull-up jump shots close to the basket that are a little more high percentage, super efficient, right? And then James Harden is a guy that can set them up in advantage situations out of pick and roll. They also are an excellent shooting team. They get 1.12 points per spot up possession, which is the fifth best in the league. And they shoot 39.6% from three, which is the best in the league. In play types, they are the fourth most efficient post-up team in the league. They are the second most efficient ISO team in the league. They are the seventh most efficient pick and roll team in the league. On the defensive end, they are 14th in defensive rating, but it's kind of confusing because they're the fourth best half-court defense, according to Cleaning the Glass, but they're the third worst transition defense, according to Cleaning the Glass. So they're a good half-court defense, an atrocious transition defense, which combines to make for an average defense. That said, typically the transition defense is something that can get cleaned up in the postseason. They're excellent on the perimeter. They're excellent on help recover situations. They're just not great in rim protection, but they do protect the paint reasonably well. They are 11th in points in the paint allowed. They are also 12th in three-pointers made allowed. And again, a lot of noise there in terms of transition defense. Here's the bat. I have three main concerns. And before I go any further, every team I have major concerns for, except for Denver. And even with them, I have the Jokic jump shot thing, which I talked about earlier, which is a little bit of a concern. Like Boston and Denver, I have little concerns. I'm a little concerned about Boston's late game decision-making and just overall offensive process. I'm a little bit concerned about Denver as it pertains to Jokic's jump shooting and whether or not he can reach the level he did last year in the postseason. But all the other teams have major concerns. Like Milwaukee's not as good offensively, in my opinion, as they need to be in order to make up for their defensive deficiencies, and their pick and roll or their point of attack defense stuff is a real problem. The Lakers are just lifeless right now, so it's hard to even tell what they're good and bad at. They look terrible one night, awesome the next, and they certainly need to make a trade. They're weak in overall offensive skill. They're weak in kind of perimeter speed. They've got a lot of stuff they got to address at the deadline, right? Like the Phoenix Suns' physicality is a major issue. They fall apart offensively in the fourth quarter as well. Minnesota is a terrible half-court offense, so they're an excellent defensive team, but they can really struggle in the chess match stuff at the end of games, or in slow-down environments. So every team has major issues. So when I talk about these major issues for the Clippers, don't take it as like me trying to pick them apart. I'm trying to pick everybody apart. That's the point. I'm trying to get to the point where I can have a better understanding of this when we get to April. Here are my three concerns for the Clippers. 1, they take the second most pull-up jump shots in the league. 2, they're a bottom 10 defensive rebounding team. They give up an offensive rebound on 43.3% of their opponents' misses in clutch situations, too. That's second worst in the league. So they're a bad defensive rebounding team who's incredibly bad in close game situations late. And then 3, they do not score in the paint. They're 17th in points in the paint per game. Now, let's elaborate that on that a little bit. Number 1, they take the second most pull-up jump shots in the league. Why does that matter? Because they hunt and depend on difficult shot making. And that's just a tough way to win in the playoffs. We've seen that with Phoenix. We've seen that with, the Nets teams, right? Like when you rely on difficult shot making, not as a counter, not like late clock situations, being really picky about when you take pull-up jump shots based on the coverage, but like you lean on interior shot making and advantage creation and the shots close to the rim and wide open catch and shoot situations and stuff like that. It should be the other way around. Like you should rely on that stuff and then have the pull-up shooting be a counter or something you're more selective with. That to me is the best shot profile for a playoff team. The Clippers are the other way around. They depend and lean into and hunt and rely on difficult shot making. And just what ends up happening a lot of times is like guys that you see make tough shots in the regular season gets more physical, guys start to wear down, the grind of the playoffs takes a toll over 2-3 series, and then suddenly it's like he's just not quite getting as much lift on that pull-up jump shot and he starts to miss them, right? So that's something that's not unique to the Clippers. That's something I talk about around the league. For example, 4 of the 5 champions since Kevin Durant and Steph Curry were playing together for the Warriors and won in 2018, 4 of the 5 champions were low-volume pull-up shooting teams. The one high-volume pull-up shooting team was Milwaukee, and they had Giannis bulldozing to the rim throughout the entire playoff run. It was Chris and Drew taking all the pull-up jump shots. So, like, NBA history tells us, typically, high-volume jump shooting teams aren't going to be the ones who hoist the trophy at the end of the day. Also, Milwaukee wasn't second in the league in attempts there. Secondly, rebounding. 4 of the 5 teams that won the title since Kevin Durant and Steph hoisted the trophy in 2018 were 11th or better in defensive rebound percentage. And the Clippers are bottom 10 and absolutely atrocious in clutch situations like we talked about. The one exception, the one team out of that 5 was Toronto with Kawhi Leonard. They were 18th in defensive rebounding, and they were a much better defensive rebounding team than this particular Clippers team is. Lastly, lack of paint scoring is pretty simple. They don't get a lot of easy shots close to the rim. They depend on guys making jump shots. There's more variance in jump shooting. You can control jump shooting for the most part, but there is a variance element to it. And that variance element is not there with around the rim shooting, or at least to a much, much smaller extent. So NBA history tells us that this kind of team construct typically doesn't win. That doesn't mean they won't win. Doesn't mean they can't win. Just means it's less likely, right? As far as like the other narrative stuff, like everyone said, James Harden isn't just called a playoff choker, as some sort of caricature of himself. Like it's a basketball thing. He, at this phase of his career, struggles to beat people off the dribble and finish around the rim in a playoff setting when the intensity and physicality goes up a level. Last year, outside of 2 games, was downright atrocious in the playoffs. And so that doesn't mean it can't happen. And again, Philly fans will tell you he was hurt, coming off of an Achilles thing that was bothering him during the regular season. I don't want to deny that, but we have a long extended sample that when we get to that level, James's efficacy drops a level. It's worth mentioning. Not the end all be all, but it's worth mentioning. So the question is, where do they go in my list of contenders? So right now I have Denver at 1, Boston at 2, Milwaukee at 3. I've decided that the teams below that have bigger question marks. The Lakers have to nail their trade, have to rebuy in. By tricking off the regular season, they put themselves in a situation where if LeBron or Anthony Davis suffer a significant injury, they will miss the playoffs. So like they've removed their margin for error. The Warriors, same thing, have to nail a bunch of trades. Minnesota's half-court offense, I think, is a real issue. I think they're going to run into some problems where they get absolutely shut down at some phases of the playoffs. So I'm putting the Clippers in at number 4. Also, I want to add Oklahoma City and Philly to this list eventually, but I want to do some deep dives on film and some numbers with them. So I'm going to wait until further down the line to do so, but I will be adding Oklahoma City and Philly to that as well. But Clippers, right now, my 4th leading championship contender.